Dan Bongino leaned toward the microphone today and stated, "I intend to demonstrate that you are the greatest deception in congressional history." He spoke with a calm demeanor, as if reading a weather forecast, stating a simple reality that everyone present would soon accept as truth. The House Oversight Committee chamber fell completely quiet, with every camera, journalist, and aide freezing in position. Then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez chuckled, not out of nervousness but a rehearsed scoff she had perfected before mirrors. It was the sort of laugh implying this man was beneath her, the kind that played excellently on Instagram Reels. "Oh, this ought to be entertaining." She leaned toward her own mic, her $3,000 jacket catching the studio lights perfectly. Her stylists had selected that specific blazer for the broadcast, and they had dedicated 45 minutes to her makeup earlier that day. This was intended to be her highlight, another viral moment of her dismantling a Republican witness. "A failed police officer turned podcast host is going to lecture me on fraud." She paused for impact, scanning the room with staged incredulity. "What is next? Are you going to attempt to sell me gold bars or perhaps survival rations for the end times?" Scattered giggles emerged from the Democratic side, and a few aides withdrew their phones to record what they presumed would be another Ocasio-Cortez victory. She was in her element now, for this was her specialty. This was her identity as the queen of comebacks and the social media crusader. "Perhaps you should stick to shouting into a microphone for enraged baby boomers," she went on, "and leave the actual governance to those who comprehend policy." More laughter followed, and a staff member flashed her a thumbs-up sign. Bongino remained motionless, sitting perfectly still with hands clasped on the desk, observing her act with the endurance of a man who had served a dozen years in the Secret Service. He had guarded presidents, he had confronted legitimate dangers, and he had mastered the art of waiting. The laughter subsided, the silence expanded, and Ocasio-Cortez's smirk wavered just for a second. She was unaccustomed to adversaries who refused to react, as she thrived on responses and required them. "Are you finished?" Bongino inquired, his tone level and unimpressed. "I am merely beginning, tough guy, and you represent everything incorrect with government." Bongino reached down and unlocked his briefcase, the leather appearing used and functional rather than expensive. "So am I," he replied, extracting a solitary folder that was neither thick nor theatrical, just a standard manila file with a printed label on the cover. He placed it on the desk, angling it so every camera lens in the chamber could capture the text. The label read, "Ocasio-Cortez, the fraud," and the room buzzed as whispers spread through the audience. $47 million. Bongino allowed those words to suspend in the atmosphere, not rushing them, giving them room to resonate. "That is the amount of currency that cycled through your web of PACs, LLCs, and shell corporations in 4 years. 47 million from individuals who placed their faith in you," he said as he opened the file. "I know the destination of every single cent, every transfer, every disbursement, and every falsehood." He stared straight at her, his gaze steady and assured. "By the time I conclude here today, everyone watching will know as well." He removed the initial document, stating, "You ought to have remained a bartender, Congresswoman, as at least that was an honorable profession." Ocasio-Cortez parted her lips to answer, to retort, to perform her usual routine. No words emerged, and for the first time in her political life, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had zero response. Dan Bongino was only getting started, and he turned to the first segment of the dossier. He operated with the systematic patience of a man who had constructed cases against narcotics cartels and shielded leaders from assassins. Every motion was intentional, and every silence was measured. "Let us commence with something basic," he stated. "Let us discuss your living situation." Ocasio-Cortez rolled her eyes with rehearsed indifference. "Oh, here we go. The right-wing fixation on my wardrobe. Very inventive. Very artistic. Not your attire, Congresswoman, but your decisions. The chasm between what you advocate and how you truly conduct your existence." He produced a document, a rental contract. "You speak frequently about affordable housing, calling it a human right. You claim working families are being decimated by rent, driven from their communities and compelled to decide between nutrition and shelter." He placed the lease on the table. "Your unit in Navy Yard, Washington, D.C. costs $3,500 monthly, in a premium building featuring a rooftop pool, a modern gym, and a round-the-clock concierge." He gazed up at her, noting that rent exceeds what most families in your precinct earn in a full month. Not their rent, but their total revenue, everything they generate from working 2 or 3 jobs. Ocasio-Cortez adjusted in her chair, her stance altering slightly, not much, but the lenses captured it. "That is standard for D.C. real estate costs, as members of Congress must sustain 2 homes, do they not?" Bongino withdrew another paper, a spreadsheet containing highlighted columns. "Here is a roster of available units within 2 miles of the Capitol structure. Plenty of choices exist under $2,000, and some are under $1,500, modest locations, the sort of places where laboring people reside." He placed the list down. "However, you did not desire those. You wanted the premium building, the one with luxuries most of your voters will never know. The one that costs more each month than some of them earn in 6 weeks of full-time employment." He paused, adding, "There is nothing wrong with desiring quality items, Congresswoman. Nothing wrong with appreciating success. But there is something amiss with constructing your whole political identity on telling others they cannot have nice things while you reside in opulence." Ocasio-Cortez's lawyer leaned in and whispered something, but she swatted him away with an annoyed motion. Bongino proceeded to the subsequent exhibit. "Let us discuss the Green New Deal, your hallmark legislation, the policy that transformed you into a national icon." He retrieved a substantial document. "You stood on the House floor and declared climate change an existential danger. You stated, 'We have 12 years to act, or the world as we know it will cease.' You claimed every American must drastically alter how they live, how they travel, and how they consume." He extracted a spreadsheet. 66 flights in 12 months, revealed in FAA logs, and every single one was first class or business class. The room buzzed. "Your individual carbon footprint from air travel alone exceeds 20 average American families combined. 20 households in a single year," he said, setting the spreadsheet down. "You expect working people to surrender their vehicles? You want them to cease eating meat? You want them to fundamentally change their lives to rescue the earth?" He looked at her. "But first class is more pleasant, is it not?" Ocasio-Cortez seized her microphone, her tone pitched sharper. "Those were work-related trips for official congressional duties." "Were they?" Bongino produced a photograph, holding it up so every lens could view it sharply. "This is Miami Beach, February 2021, while Texas was freezing, while people were literally perishing without electricity or warmth." The picture displayed Ocasio-Cortez in swimwear, a champagne flute in hand, giggling at a beach cabana. You flew to Florida for a donor event, a fundraiser at a coastal estate, while your peers were coordinating relief missions and your voters in New York were handling their own winter crises. He placed the photo down. "This picture was uploaded by an acquaintance of yours on Instagram. and they removed it within an hour when someone noted the optics. However, nothing ever truly vanishes from the internet. He withdrew another picture. And here you are, 2 days later, back in New York, posting about climate justice and the critical need for the Green New Deal. He looked at her with something resembling sympathy. The champagne on the shore was enjoyable, though, I am certain. Ocasio-Cortez's complexion turned crimson, and her hands grasped the rim of the desk. That was a previously arranged commitment. Let us move forward, Bongino cut in, not caring about her justifications, as he was constructing an indictment. You advocate defunding the police, claiming communities do not require armed officers walking their avenues. You state the funds should go to social services instead, mental health professionals, community initiatives, anything except cops. He fanned out a fresh batch of papers. Your private security costs for the past 2 years revealed through financial disclosures that your team attempted very hard to conceal in bureaucracy. He gestured to the figures. Over $70,000 exposed right here in clear ink. He looked at her. Armed private guards, trained experts with firearms for you, to keep you secure while you tell single moms in the Bronx they do not require police safety. That is entirely different, as I receive valid death threats, and my life has been in danger. So do they, Congresswoman. Bongino's tone became rigid. The single mother, laboring on the night shift at a store in your precinct. The older gentleman walking home from Mass. The children attempting to reach school through gang zones. They encounter threats every single day. Genuine threats. Persistent threats. He paused. The distinction is, they cannot afford $70,000 in private protection, and you wish to remove the only safety they possess. The chamber was entirely quiet now, as even the tapping of keypads had ceased. Bongino retrieved one additional set of papers from this segment. Your staff, the individuals who labor for you daily, the young visionaries who believed in your message and desired to be part of your cause. He read from an official submission, anonymous grievances lodged with the Office of Congressional Ethics. Let me read you some excerpts, he said, fixing his reading spectacles. Quote, the Congresswoman demands total allegiance but treats staff like personal maids. Unpaid overtime is mandated, and any objections are met with threats regarding career outcomes, end quote. He turned to another sheet. Quote, she sermonizes about worker rights on TV but manages her own office like a sweatshop. Interns work full-time hours with zero pay, while she delivers speeches about living wages, end quote. He turned another page. Quote, there are 2 versions of her, the public one who worries about laborers and the private one who yells at junior staff for fetching the incorrect coffee, end quote. He placed the papers down. The defender of the working class cannot even treat her own employees with fundamental human respect. Ocasio-Cortez's voice fractured. Those grievances were never verified. They are anonymous allegations from disgruntled former employees. They are sworn declarations, Congresswoman, filed under penalty of perjury from people who labored for you, who trusted you, who saw who you truly are when the lenses are not recording. Bongino shut that portion of the file. But you know what? Living as a hypocrite is not technically a felony. It is just sad, just pathetic, just evidence that you do not believe a single word of what you advocate. He opened the subsequent section. The pages are thicker here, more dense, as this is where we arrive at the actual statutes. Bongino took a deep inhale before proceeding. He comprehended timing, he knew how to escalate tension, and this was the segment that would terminate careers. Let us discuss finances, he stated, Specifically, let us discuss the $47 million that cycled through your political network in 4 years. He extracted a complicated chart. Lines linking boxes, arrows demonstrating flows of currency, names and groups knotted together like a net. Brand New Congress PAC, Justice Democrats, Courage to Change PAC, 3 entities all linked to you, all shifting money in designs that would make a professional money launderer envious. Ocasio-Cortez forced a scornful chuckle. Those are valid political groups that back progressive nominees across the nation. That were utilized to shift money in loops until nobody could track where it actually went, Bongino said, holding up the chart. Let me guide you through it step by step, simple enough for everyone viewing at home to comprehend. He pointed to the initial box. Donations arrive to Brand New Congress PAC, small donors, working folks, people who believed in your message about battling corruption and representing the little guy. They gave $20, $50, whatever they could spare, and some of them skipped dinners to donate. He followed a line on the graph. That currency then gets paid to Brand New Congress LLC, a private limited liability firm for, quote, campaign services, end quote. Sounds proper, correct? Another line. Brand New Congress LLC then pays a firm named Middle Seat Consulting for additional, quote, services, end quote. He looked up. Care to guess who managed Middle Seat Consulting? Silence. Your former chief of staff, Saikat Chakrabarti, the same man who established Justice Democrats, the same man who enlisted you to run for Congress initially. The man who found you at a casting call, yes, a casting call for progressive nominees. Bongino placed the diagram down. The cash goes in a loop from PAC to LLC to consulting agency and back into the wallets of your inner circle. Along the way, millions of dollars simply vanish into ambiguous categories like operating costs and consulting fees. He withdrew official filings. Federal Election Commission records demonstrate over $1 million in payments that cannot be adequately explained. The paperwork is absent, the services are undefined, and the money just evaporated. He fanned the papers out. The FEC has received numerous formal grievances about these setups. They have been inquiring for years, and the only reason indictments haven't been lodged is because the commission has been stalled along partisan lines. He gazed at her. But the FBI does not possess that issue, and they have been examining this very closely. Ocasio-Cortez's lawyer was scribbling frantically on a legal pad, looking ashen. Let us discuss something more precise, Bongino continued. Let us discuss your boyfriend. The room went very quiet, as this was personal now. Riley Roberts, your longtime partner, by all accounts a pleasant enough fellow. Not a political operative, not a campaign strategist, not a communications expert, as his background is in web design. He set down payment logs. Your campaign and affiliated PACs paid Riley Roberts $6,000 a month, every month for over a year for, quote, marketing consulting, end quote. He calculated aloud. That is more than $72,000 from donor funds for marketing consulting. He looked at Ocasio-Cortez. What did he generate? What campaigns did he design? What marketing tactics did he formulate? What deliverables exist with his name on them? The silence expanded. I will answer for you, Congresswoman. Nothing. There is no portfolio, no documented work output, no proof that he did anything at all to merit that cash. Just checks written to your boyfriend from funds donated by laboring people who thought they were backing a political cause. Ocasio-Cortez's voice climbed defensively. Riley supplied valuable digital strategy and continuous consultation on various matters. Then show me, Bongino's voice sliced through her justification. Show this committee one single item of work. He produced one strategy paper, one campaign creative, one email thread discussing deliverables, one anything. She did not reply. I have examined every filing, every document your campaign generated, and his name appears only on payment logs, never on any actual work output. He extracted another sheet of paper. But here is where it gets truly intriguing. Let me tell you about Maria Gonzalez. He paused, allowing the name to settle in the chamber. Maria Gonzalez, single mother of two, resides in the Bronx, in your district, the district you claim to represent and battle for. He placed down a printed declaration. Maria works 2 jobs. She cleans office towers downtown at night, and during the day, she works at a laundromat, folding other people's garments. She earns about $14 an hour when you average it out. No benefits, no sick days, no vacation. He looked at the document. In 2018, Maria donated $50 to your campaign. That $50 represented a full day's earnings for her, and she had to skip purchasing groceries that week to afford it. He looked at Ocasio-Cortez. She believed in you. She watched your videos. She saw someone who resembled her, who spoke about struggles like hers, who promised to fight for people the system had neglected. He tapped the payment record for Riley Roberts. Maria's $50 helped pay your boyfriend $6,000 a month to produce nothing. His voice dropped deeper. Maria skipped meals so her children could eat that week, and her donation went to subsidize your boyfriend's lifestyle. Ocasio-Cortez blinked rapidly, her eyes becoming moist. Whether from sentiment or calculation, it was difficult to discern. That is a gross mischaracterization of how campaign finance works. Is it? Bongino withdrew an email printout. Let me read you something. This is an email from your personal account to Saikat Chakrabarti, dated March 15, 2019. He read deliberately, ensuring every word was seized by the microphones. Quote, make sure the transfers do not look connected. Use different entity names for each step. The small donors can never find out who is really benefiting from their money. Keep it clean on paper. End quote. He set the email down on the desk. That is not staff making accounting mistakes. That is not confusion about complex campaign finance rules. That is you personally and directly instructing your chief of staff to conceal where the money was going. A Democratic member of the committee shifted uneasily in his chair, and the ranking member was staring at the table, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. You told Maria Gonzalez and thousands of donors just like her that their money was funding a movement, a revolution, a fight for the working class against the corrupt establishment. Bongino's voice solidified. It was funding your inner circle, your boyfriend, your political operatives, your personal existence. He pulled out one final document from this section. Total amount of donor cash that went directly to entities controlled by you, your boyfriend, or your close personal associates based on FEC filings and corporate registry records. $4.2 million. He let that number sit in the atmosphere. $4.2 million from people like Maria Gonzalez, from people who sacrificed for you, who believed you were different from every other politician. He closed that section of the folder. But that is just the money we can trace to American donors, as not all the funds came from Americans. He opened the next section. And that is where this narrative gets truly dark. Bongino turned to a new tab in the file. This section has photographs clipped to the top, images that had shaped history. June 24, 2018, he began. A date that transformed your entire career. A date that made you a national figure. He held up the famous photograph, as every person in America had viewed it. Ocasio-Cortez at the border fence in Texas, hand pressed over her mouth, tears streaming down her face, the image of compassion confronting cruelty. This image went viral within hours. It was shared millions of times. It launched 1,000 news segments and magazine covers. It turned you from a long-shot primary challenger into a national icon. He set it down gently, almost reverently. A young Latina congresswoman overcome with emotion at the sight of immigrant children separated from their parents. It was powerful, it was moving, it was exactly what the moment required. He paused. There is just one problem with that narrative. He held up another photograph. This was taken 5 minutes before the famous shot. Same location, same day, same photographer actually, who kept all his images and was kind enough to share the complete sequence with federal investigators. The second photo showed Ocasio-Cortez in the same white outfit at the same fence, but she wasn't crying, she was laughing with her staff, checking her makeup in a phone screen, adjusting her hair for the cameras. And this one was taken 12 minutes after the crying photo, a third image. Ocasio-Cortez smiling broadly, posing for selfies with supporters, not a tear in sight. Her makeup fresh and perfect. Your grief lasted exactly as long as it needed to for the photographers to get the shot. Approximately 5 minutes sandwiched between smiles and selfies. Ocasio-Cortez shook her head vigorously, her voice rising. Those photos are completely taken out of context. I was genuinely overwhelmed by what I saw at that facility. Were you? Bongino pulled out a text message log. This is from your communications director that morning, sent 3 hours before you arrived at the facility. He read from the printout. Quote, make sure photographers are positioned at the fence before she arrives. We need the emotion shot. Have tissues ready in case she needs them. Tell her to think about something sad if she needs to get the tears going. End quote. He set it down. The emotion shot. That is what your team called it. Not a genuine moment of human compassion, a shot, a performance, something to be manufactured and captured for maximum political impact. He pulled out another text exchange. And this one is from you, sent to your campaign manager 2 hours after the photos were taken. He read, quote, the crying pic is blowing up everywhere. This is going to be massive for fundraising. Get the donation page ready. We need to capitalize before the news cycle moves on. End quote. His voice dropped lower, harder. The children in those facilities were real. Their fear was real. Their confusion about being separated from their parents was real. Their suffering was real. He looked directly at Ocasio-Cortez. And you used them as props for a fundraising email. Ocasio-Cortez's voice cracked with what might have been genuine emotion. I care deeply about those children. I have fought tirelessly for immigration reform. Have you? Bongino pulled out a calendar document. This is your official congressional schedule for the 2 years following that famous photograph. Let us count how many times you visited a border facility to actually engage with the issue. He flipped through the pages. The answer is 0. Not once. You never went back. The photo op was enough. He pulled out more documents. But you did find time to do 427 media interviews about the border. You found time for magazine photo shoots and documentary appearances. You found time to raise $11.3 million off immigration-related appeals. He set the papers down. You just never found time to actually go back and do anything substantive about the problem. He spread out printouts of her social media posts. You called those facilities concentration camps. You compared Border Patrol agents to Nazi guards. You said America was operating a system of state-sponsored terror against brown children. He looked at her. Strong words, inflammatory words, words designed to generate maximum outrage and maximum donations. He pulled out a different document. Words that also put targets on the backs of federal agents trying to do an impossible job. He read from an incident report. 3 Border Patrol agents were physically assaulted by protesters who cited your rhetoric as justification. One of them, Agent Manuel Padilla, was hospitalized for 2 weeks with a severe concussion and 3 broken ribs. He has a wife and 3 young children who spent those 2 weeks wondering if their father would ever be the same. Ocasio-Cortez opened her mouth, but for once, nothing came out. You got your headlines. Agent Padilla got brain damage and broken bones. Bongino moved to the next page. But let us examine what you actually did for immigration policy. Not the tweets, not the Instagram stories, not the cable news appearances, the actual legislative work. He held up a thin document. This is every piece of immigration-related legislation you have sponsored in 4 years in Congress. He flipped through the pages slowly. Resolutions, non-binding statements, symbolic gestures, press release material designed to generate social media engagement. He set it down. Not a single substantive bill that became law. Not one policy change that actually helped a single immigrant family. Just performance. He pulled out financial records. But while you were performing outrage, something interesting was happening with your fundraising. Open border advocacy groups, organizations pushing for ending all deportations, removing every barrier to entry. They donated heavily to your PACs after that photo went viral. He pointed to specific line items. Some of these organizations have been flagged by law enforcement for concerning connections. Money flows that trace back through several layers to people who profit from chaos at the border. Ocasio-Cortez slammed her hand on the table. That is an outrageous and racist insinuation. Is it? Bongino held up a Department of Homeland Security report. This is from an ongoing investigation into funding networks for organizations that actively work to undermine border security. Your PACs received donations from 3 groups specifically named in this report. He set it down. Did you check where the money came from? Did you ask questions about these donors? Did you do any due diligence at all? Silence. You just cashed the checks and kept performing. He leaned forward slightly. Every year, thousands of migrants die crossing the desert because they were told the border was open and America was waiting with welcome arms. Women are assaulted, children are trafficked, families pay their entire life savings to criminal organizations who leave them to die in the heat. His voice was hard now, no longer professorial, something closer to anger. And you profit from the chaos. You fundraise off the suffering. You build your political brand on the bodies of people you claim to care about. He closed that section. But exploiting immigrants for donations and social media engagement is not even the worst thing you have done. He opened the next section of the folder, the final major section. The worst thing is what you really think about the people who actually voted for you, the people who believed you were one of them. Bongino paused before opening this section. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, quieter, almost sad. This is the part that is going to hurt the most, he said. Not you, Congresswoman. You already know what is in here. You lived it. He looked toward the gallery, toward the cameras. This is going to hurt the people watching at home, the people who believed in you, the people who saw you as a symbol of hope. He opened the folder. Let us start with Amazon. Ocasio-Cortez visibly stiffened. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. 2019, Amazon announces plans to build a second headquarters in Long Island City, Queens, your district. He pulled out economic projections. 25,000 jobs, not minimum wage jobs. Professional positions with an average salary of $150,000 per year. Direct investment of over $2 billion into your community. Tax revenue that would have funded schools and infrastructure for decades. He spread out news clippings from that period. You led the opposition. You organized protests. You called it corporate welfare. You stated the tax incentives were a giveaway to a billionaire who did not require assistance. He pulled out a statement from Amazon, and it worked. Amazon withdrew. They took those 25,000 jobs elsewhere. They invested those billions of dollars in a different community. He looked at her. You celebrated. You called it a victory for the people, and your supporters cheered. He paused. But a victory for which people exactly? He pulled out an email. This is from your personal account, sent to a major donor 1 week after Amazon announced they were withdrawing. He read slowly, carefully, ensuring every word was audible. Quote, the Amazon thing worked out even better than we expected. Those tech workers would have completely gentrified the district within 5 years. They would have voted for centrist Democrats or even Republicans. Better to keep the current voter base in place. Poor people who depend on government programs are reliable voters for us. That is our base. That is our path to power. End quote. The hearing room was absolutely silent, and no one moved. You did not kill those 25,000 jobs because of principle, Bongino said slowly. You killed them because financially secure, well-educated voters might not need you anymore. He set the email down. 25,000 families, 25,000 chances for working people in your district to build wealth, to buy homes, to send their kids to good colleges, to achieve the American dream you claim to fight for. He looked at her. And you killed it deliberately, because their success would have threatened your political power. Ocasio-Cortez was shaking now. Her voice came out strangled. That is not what I meant. It is being taken completely out of... What did you mean then? Explain it. Tell the people in your district what you meant when you said it is better to keep them poor and dependent. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Bongino pulled out phone records. Amazon was cold calculation, political strategy. This next part is personal. This is what you really think about the people who trusted you. He held up a thick printout. These are text messages from your personal cell phone, obtained legally through a warrant issued as part of an ongoing federal investigation into campaign finance violations. He found a specific page. March 15, 2021. Text message to a college friend from your Boston University days. He read slowly, letting each word land. Quote, these Bronx people are honestly so easy to manipulate. Just say the word socialism a few times and throw in some Spanish phrases, and they cheer like trained seals. End quote. Gasps from the gallery, and a staffer walked out of the room. Bongino continued. Same conversation 2 minutes later. Quote, they will vote for me literally no matter what I do. They are not smart enough to realize when they are being played. All I have to do is say I am fighting for them, and they believe it. End quote. More gasps, and someone in the gallery was crying. And then this one. Quote, the Bronx is basically just my brand at this point, like a logo I own. I would never in a million years actually live there again. Can you imagine? End quote. He set the phone records down. Those are your words, your private thoughts, written to a friend when you thought no one would ever see them. When you felt safe enough to say what you actually believe. Ocasio-Cortez's voice was barely a whisper. Broken. Those texts are taken completely out of context. I was venting about the pressures of— What context makes it acceptable to call your voters trained seals? Silence. What context makes it okay to say they are too stupid to know when they are being played? More silence. What context makes calling your district just a brand that you own anything other than contempt for the people who elected you? Bongino didn't wait for an answer. There is no context that makes any of that acceptable. There is just you saying what you really believe when you thought you were safe. He pulled out more documents. Let us talk about who you actually employ, who you trust to serve your constituents. He spread out personnel records. 14 full-time staffers in your congressional office. I went through their backgrounds, their resumes, their histories. He pointed to the data. 12 of them are from out of state. They moved to New York to work for you. 10 have Ivy League degrees. Only 2 actually grew up in your district. Only 2 are actually from the community you claim to represent. He looked at her. Champion of the working-class Bronx cannot find qualified workers from the Bronx. He pulled out another document. Your Hispanic outreach coordinator, the person responsible for connecting you with the Latino community. Raised in suburban Connecticut, attended Yale, does not speak fluent Spanish. He set it down. But she had the right family connections. She knew the right people from the right schools. He pulled out more employment records. Meanwhile, there are young people in your district who would give anything for a chance to work in Congress. Kids who grew up in the Bronx, who went to public schools, who actually know the community, who could actually connect with constituents. He shook his head. You never gave them a chance. They did not have the right credentials, the right pedigrees. Bongino pulled out one more piece of evidence. Speaking of your connection to the community, let us talk about your heritage, your identity. Ocasio-Cortez tensed visibly. You present yourself as a Latina from the Bronx, a daughter of the working class, a woman connected to her Puerto Rican roots. He pulled out a transcript. This is from a Univision interview last year. You attempted to answer several questions in Spanish. Here is what a professional linguist who reviewed the tape had to say. He read from the analysis. Quote, the subject speaks Spanish at approximately an intermediate tourist level. Her pronunciation is heavily Americanized. Her grammar is consistently incorrect in ways that a native speaker raised in a Spanish-speaking household would never make. The errors suggest someone who learned Spanish as a second language in school rather than at home. End quote. He set it down. You perform being Latina for the cameras. You use Spanish phrases as props. But the actual language, the actual culture, the actual connection to the community, you never really had it. Ocasio-Cortez was crying now, tears cutting lines through her makeup, mascara running. My family is Puerto Rican. I am Puerto Rican. This is a racist attack on my identity. It is not an attack on Puerto Ricans, Congresswoman. It is an observation about you specifically. About the gap between the identity you perform and the person you actually are. Bongino's voice softened slightly. Not with sympathy, with something closer to pity. You grew up in Yorktown Heights, median household income $96,000 a year, one of the wealthier suburbs in New York. Nice houses, good schools, safe streets, country clubs nearby. He paused. There is nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with having a comfortable childhood. Nothing wrong with being fortunate. He looked at her. But that is not the story you tell, is it? You tell people you are from the Bronx, from the struggle, from the streets. Because that story sells better. Because that story gets donations. Because that story wins elections. He shook his head slowly. You stole the identity of your own community. You appropriated their struggle, their story, their pain to advance your career. And in private, you laugh at them for being stupid enough to believe you. He closed the folder. That is not democratic socialism, Congresswoman. That is not fighting for the working class. That is just fraud. Plain and simple fraud. The hearing room felt different now. The energy had shifted completely. The confident arena of political theater had become something else, something quieter, something sadder. Ocasio-Cortez sat slumped in her chair. Her makeup was ruined. The polished warrior who had walked in that morning had been replaced by something smaller, something broken. "I want to respond," she said, her voice wet from crying. "I have the right to respond to these accusations." Chairman James nodded. "The witness has concluded his testimony. The Congresswoman may make a statement." Ocasio-Cortez straightened in her chair, tried to find the fire that had always come so naturally before. Tried to summon the fighter who had never backed down. This is a political witch hunt," she began. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. "A coordinated attack by right-wing forces who are terrified of strong, progressive women. Every piece of so-called evidence presented today has been taken out of context, twisted, manipulated, and weaponized by people who want to silence the voice of working people in this country." She looked at the cameras, tried to find her audience. "They are afraid of us, afraid of a movement that threatens their grip on power. So they dig through our emails, our private text messages, our personal lives, looking for anything they can twist into a scandal." Her voice gained some strength. "I will not be silenced. I will not be intimidated. And I will not apologize for fighting for the people who need a champion in Washington." She turned to face Bongino directly. "You are a failed cop who could not cut it in law enforcement. A conspiracy theorist who peddles nonsense to angry people for money. A puppet for billionaires who want to crush the dreams of ordinary Americans." She lifted her chin. "Nothing you have said here today changes who I am or what I stand for." The room waited. Bongino slowly reached back into his briefcase. "You done?" He pulled out one final document. "Because I have something else you should see." He set it on the table. "This is a cooperation agreement signed 6 months ago by Saikat Chakrabarti, your former chief of staff, the man who built your entire political operation from the ground up." The color drained completely from Ocasio-Cortez's face. "He has been talking to federal investigators for half a year. He provided the emails, the financial records, the text messages. Everything I presented today came from the man who knows exactly how your operation worked because he helped build it." Bongino pulled out another document. "Your boyfriend Riley Roberts, he has been interviewed twice by the FBI. He provided detailed records of every payment he received and exactly what he did to earn them, which was nothing." Another document. 4 former staff members have given sworn statements about the working conditions in your office. The unpaid overtime, the verbal abuse, the threats against anyone who complained. He spread them all across the table. "You called this a witch hunt, but witch hunts chase imaginary enemies. The evidence against you is documented, corroborated, real." Ocasio-Cortez turned desperately to her colleagues, the other members of the squad. The women who had stood beside her through every controversy, who had defended her against every attack. "Ilhan, Rashida, Ayana, you know this is political persecution. You know what they are trying to do. Say something. Tell them." Silence. Representative Omar studied her notes intently. Representative Clyde was suddenly fascinated by something on her phone. Representative Presley looked away, out toward the gallery, at nothing in particular. No one spoke. "They are not coming to rescue you," Bongino said quietly. "They have known this was coming for weeks. We made sure they knew, and they have already made their choices." He pulled out printed statements. Representative Omar released 40 finance minutes ago. Quote, "I have no knowledge of Representative Ocasio-Cortez's financial arrangements and cannot speak to any ongoing investigation." End quote. Another paper. Representative Tlaib released this morning, quote, "Each congressional office is responsible for its own compliance with campaign finance regulations. I wish my colleague well during this difficult period." End quote. Another, Representative Presley, has not released a formal statement, but she unfollowed you on all social media platforms yesterday, and she has deleted every photograph featuring both of you from the last 3 years. He set the papers down. They saw the evidence. They calculated the odds. They chose to save themselves. Ocasio-Cortez looked around the room with growing desperation. At her staff who would not meet her eyes. At her colleagues who were finding reasons to be anywhere else. At the cameras that were still rolling, capturing every moment of her collapse. She was utterly alone. "This is not fair," she whispered. The words came out broken like a child's. "I was trying to help people. I was trying to change things. I was trying to make a difference." Bongino's voice was not cruel when he responded. It was tired, disappointed. "Maybe you were once, at the beginning. Maybe there was a version of you who actually believed the things you said." He closed his briefcase. "But somewhere along the way, you started believing you were special, that the rules did not apply to you, that you were too important to be held accountable, that the people who supported you were tools to be used rather than citizens to be served." He looked at her with something that might have been pity. "I do not think you are evil, Congresswoman. I think you are what happens when someone gets famous too fast, gets too much power too young, with no one around willing to tell them no. I think you got lost somewhere between your first viral tweet and your 50th magazine cover." He stood up. "But that does not undo the damage, does not give back the money, does not unbreak the trust, does not help the people you hurt." Chairman James cleared his throat and addressed the room formally. "This committee has heard extensive testimony and examined substantial evidence regarding potential violations of federal campaign finance law, wire fraud statutes, and congressional ethics standards." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Based on the proceedings today, I am directing committee staff to prepare a formal referral to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation. Additionally, I am recommending that the House Ethics Committee open its own investigation immediately." He looked at Ocasio-Cortez. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez, you are strongly advised to retain experienced legal counsel. This hearing is adjourned." He brought the gavel down with a sharp crack. Ocasio-Cortez tried to stand. Her legs did not cooperate. She grabbed the table for support, knuckles white against the wood. Her staff rushed over to help her. She pushed them away with trembling hands. "I can walk out of here myself." She made it 3 steps toward the door before the wall of camera flashes started. A blinding storm of light and noise, reporters shouting questions from every direction. "Congresswoman, will you resign? Do you have a response to the text messages? What do you say to the donors who trusted you? Will you cooperate with the federal investigation?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Words had always been her weapon, but now they had abandoned her completely. The door closed behind her, the cameras kept flashing, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was already gone. Her career did not end with handcuffs or dramatic confrontation. It ended with silence and closed doors, and somehow that was worse. The news spread faster than anyone could have predicted. Within 1 hour, the video clips were everywhere. Social media exploded with reaction. Within 2 hours, every cable network had cleared their regular programming for continuous coverage. Within 3 hours, the first calls for resignation came from members of her own party. Quiet calls, careful calls, but calls nonetheless. In the Bronx, the reaction was different from the political chatter in Washington. Maria Gonzalez sat in her small apartment that evening, watching the news coverage on a television she could not afford to replace. The screen was old. The picture was fuzzy, but the images were clear enough. In her weathered hands, she held a donation receipt from 2018. $50, a full day's wages from years ago when she had believed. A local reporter had found her somehow, knocked on her door with a camera crew looking for the human story behind the numbers. "I believed in her," Maria said quietly. Her English was accented, but clear. She had practiced these words in her head all afternoon. "I told my daughters, look at this woman. She looks like us. She talks about our struggles. She came from nothing, and now she is in Congress fighting for people like us." She looked down at the faded receipt. "I told my girls that if they worked hard and stayed honest, maybe they could do something important too. Maybe they could change things." The tears came slowly. "I skipped buying groceries that week to send her that money. I told myself it was an investment in our future, in our community, in someone who understood." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "She called us stupid. She said we were easy to manipulate. She laughed at us with her rich friends." The reporter asked what she wanted to say to Ocasio-Cortez. Maria thought for a long moment before answering. "I want to say that she broke something important, not just my trust, something bigger. She made people like me afraid to believe in anyone ever again." She looked at the donation receipt one more time. "That is the worst part. Not the $50. I can earn $50. But the hope she stole, I do not know how to get that back." Across the district, similar scenes played out through the evening and into the night. In bodegas and laundromats, in crowded apartments where multiple families shared small spaces, in late-night diners where working people grabbed meals between shifts. People who had believed watched their faith collapse in real time. They had given her their votes, their money, their hope, their dreams for something better. She had given them a performance. Dan Bongino did one interview that evening. Only one. He turned down the others. The reporter asked if he was proud of what he had accomplished. Bongino shook his head slowly. "Proud is not the right word for any of this. There is nothing here to be proud of." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "A young woman destroyed her own career through arrogance and greed. Thousands of people who believed in her feel betrayed tonight. Her district still does not have the 25,000 jobs she killed. The immigrant families she used as props are still suffering at the border." He looked directly at the camera. "I did not create this situation. I just exposed it. I presented evidence and let people draw their own conclusions." The reporter asked if he felt any sympathy for Ocasio-Cortez. Bongino thought about it before answering. "I feel sympathy for who she could have been. She had real gifts, intelligence, charisma, the ability to connect with people and inspire them. If she had used those gifts honestly, she might have actually accomplished something meaningful." He shook his head. "But she made different choices, and those choices led here." Later that night, Dan Bongino sat alone in his home office. The television was off. His phone was silenced. The folder that had contained his evidence was now filed away, its contents in the hands of federal investigators. He thought about the young woman who had walked into Congress 4 years ago. He had watched her rise like everyone else, had seen the fire in her eyes, the certainty in her voice. 29 years old, and absolutely sure she was going to change the world. Somewhere along the way, she had started making choices, small ones at first, probably. A donor not questioned too closely. An expense report fudged slightly. A private text message that said what she really thought. Until the small compromises became big ones. Until the lies grew too heavy to carry. Until the person she performed on camera had nothing in common with who she actually was in private. His phone buzzed, a text from his supervisor at the bureau. "New file on your desk tomorrow. Different name, same pattern." Bongino read the message twice, then set his phone down. There was always another one. Always another politician who believed they were above the rules. Another true believer who traded their principles for power and comfort. Another promise, broken to the people who could least afford broken promises. He filed the folder away in his cabinet with the others. Then he turned off the light and headed home to his family. Tomorrow, the work would continue. It always did. 3 days later, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez submitted her resignation from Congress. The letter was brief. It cited a need to focus on personal matters and spend time with family. It did not admit to any wrongdoing. It did not apologize to her donors. It did not acknowledge the people she had called stupid and easy to manipulate. The investigation continued without her. Subpoenas were issued. Grand juries were convened. The wheels of justice, slow but grinding, began to turn. In the Bronx, life went on. Maria Gonzalez went back to work at the laundromat the morning after the hearing. She had bills to pay, children to feed, no time for grief over broken political dreams. But she took down the poster she had kept on her wall, the one with Ocasio-Cortez's face, and the slogan about fighting for working families. She folded it carefully and put it in the trash. Some things, once broken, cannot be repaired.